Hi everybody, welcome back to The Depths. My name is Brandon Jones. I am joined by our GT tech heads. We have Marco here, Dan, and Lee. And we're going to watch the entirety of the Battlefield 4 new trailer and talk about the graphics, the hot visuals, and what we can expect from the next gen. So let's get started.
It's funny that they didn't have the Frostbite logo up in the beginning. They usually do that.
Right. And the fishing, I'm guessing, is the joke for the car flipping over into the water. Yeah. Which doesn't look that deep. They actually crash pretty close to shore. I mean, they drive off a road on the beach into the water, and it's like...
It takes them a while to swim back up, though.
It's just very, very deep for where they are. So, Bubbles. Anything about Bubbles?
Lee, that's your field.
Yeah, bubbles are pretty complex, though this could just be spreaded particles. But they look really good. They look like they're reacting to the light, so they look like they have some sort of refractions or reflections on them. It's definitely kind of complex to do. It's rare you see actual good bubbles in games these days.
You saw they turned on the light there, and you start to see these like the caustics on the car itself, over on the left-hand side of the screen. I don't know. It just kind of looks a little, I don't know, not quite realistic. Maybe it's reflecting through the glass. I don't know if they're trying to emulate that.
Well, it's cinematic though. You know?
Yeah.
They're trying to make it look beautiful.
But that's also real caustics is something that takes heavy calculation. You know, it's the way that the light is diffracting through water, and creates that ripple motion of light on the surfaces that inside underwater. So it's the light coming in from above and then getting refracted by the moving water and then falling onto the surface of the object in the car.
I think one of the big questions I have, I mean, this is maybe getting into more into gameplay. I mean, obviously, this is gameplay right here. This is a guy with a controller playing the game. But, I mean, that first scene in the car, that was all the cinema, right? There was no, because it just kind of had this like kind of drunk, lazy movement about it that like didn't seem like anybody was actually controlling that. So I think that's kind of one of the big questions that I have and maybe other people have is like, what in this is the person controlling and what in this is, you know, actually happening like in a cinema?
I think like in first-person shooters, especially like, you know, the Call of Duty Battlefield games, like you usually, whenever you see the gun on screen, that's when you can move the camera.
This is rad. I think just that sun coming in through the windows right there.
Well, the volumetric lighting, the God rays coming in through the windows, and that's something that's really nice. And a lot of these like reflections that I don't know if you saw as much in the other games.
Look at this little detail. You can see through the scope what the scope is seeing. Yeah. Usually in first-person shooters, like modern ones, there's just some reflection there that's generic. Here you can actually see distorted imagery through the scope, even while you're not looking through it, which is insane. You know, it's kind of like when you look at a periscope without putting your eye in it, like you can kind of see the light and the distortion of what it's looking at, but you can't really see. It's really cool.
And there again with the volumetrics with the flashlights, so that's real time. Those characters are moving down there, yeah, and you're seeing the real time like volumetric lighting from their lights. And then with the one thing I would say about the sniper is when you look through it, it's transparency on top of reflections, which has always been something tricky in games that doesn't quite look right with the hardware render. And this looks like, I mean, they're doing it really. It looks amazing. Sometimes when you see more of the reflection when they're, you know, depending on the angle of the light, you know, and you know, when you're outdoors, you don't see through it as well.
Yeah, usually first-person shooters, when you look through the scopes, it's just putting an overlay on the screen, you know. But here it looks like, from what I've seen, and you're gonna see later on, it actually looks like you're looking through the actual polygon model.
It's acting more like glass really would act, and yeah, and therefore like making it more difficult in gameplay. If you're outdoors and there's a heavy reflection, it's harder to, you know, just like this to see through it.
Now, coming up is my least favorite moment in the whole video, and this kind of, it isn't really so much graphics, but is really just AI and character movement and the way the game handles damage. But he aims for this guy in the window, and I think, did he kill that guy? Pops this guy in the chest, pops right back up, in the chest again, pops right back up, and then kills him. Yeah, and like that's, I don't know, it's maybe we're not there yet, but I think for me it's really interesting to have this game look so gorgeous, and then in an instant I'm immediately pulled out and just reminded of like, oh, okay, I'm playing these games that I'm used to playing. It just maybe the sun will be a little bit brighter
And there's no reflections on the with those guys running on those puddles in the alley. You know, if we back it up and look at it, you can see there's I don't know why if you're gonna look directly at those characters through a sniper, why not give them reflections? You know, it's something to me that I see that is very noticeable because I look at this kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah.
But you catch that in almost unconsciously when you're playing. Like little things like that matter.
I think like the bullet sponge thing you brought up earlier was like in Battlefield 3 I always turned it on hardcore mode and even Bad Company 2 because even on multiplayer like you know enemies like other players you could hit them like 3 times in the chest and they wouldn't die, you know, and hardcore mode like usually like a couple hits in the leg and you kill them.
Yeah,
so.
someone dying from a leg stab. Even Assassin's Creed. I watched the Black Flag trailer this morning, and he just like knifes a guy in the side, and the guy's like dead, just falls over. Oh, I died.
If you get punctured in the even in the leg, that hurts.
Right.
Like you're not gonna be thinking about shooting after that.
Anything about foliage here? I mean, we got a lot of nice little jungle scenes. It's pretty much the only jungle scene. We're pretty much back in the city now. But
it's really a complex thing to do, and they're showing a lot of like particle stuff here too. But yeah, the fact that in next gen, the one thing I've noticed is that the foliage has become more individualized. Like usually you get like leaves that are large transparencies or like mixtures of transparent textures laid together, and this looks like they've really individualized every leaf, every blade of grass. Everything seems to have its own
the
space.
trees in Assassin's Creed 3 were a little brutal. Whenever they would do the pan around when you do capture a viewpoint, it was like, oh, that's a bad looking tree.
There's a lot more polygons going on in this scene. Like at one time, I think that's the definitely higher. Like everything's up to the next level, higher detailed texture maps, more polygons. So they're able. The ground is more like detailed and has more just little things like the way the dirt and the rocks are laid out there. It just feels so much more real because I think they're using much higher res models. And
now, as a Battlefield fan, Marco, would that little move with the grenade launcher going through the wall, is that something you could pull off in Bad Company 1 or 2?
Oh yeah,
or?
sure.
Okay.
You could do that.
Was anything different about the way that felt or the way that looked or anything in this?
No, actually, like I was hoping for like the formidable terrain, like actually like mortar fire would create craters on the ground that are huge and stuff like that. There's no scene in the trailer that you can actually see that happen, but like that big explosion there, like I would assume like if you zoom in, like there would be a big crater, but maybe not. I don't know. This reminds me a lot of Gulf of Omen, actually.
Of what?
Gulf of Omen, one of the more popular levels and multiplayer levels. Looks really cool.
It's interesting. It makes me wonder, especially in this scene. I mean, like dust and everything. Obviously, there's dirt everywhere, so like that makes sense. But like, there's kind of bird overload when they first walk in. I think there's like 1,000 birds flying around in the sky, and like, I just wonder if they're like, oh, well, we've been to this area, and there were just that many birds there, or they're clearly like pumping as many birds in as they possibly can because it's they're displaying the graphics. Like the buildings on the side there have these drapes of, under construction, and it's like, was that an aesthetic choice or was that just because they could do it?
Absolutely, everything they do here you can tell is an aesthetic choice. The particle capacity of the next gen is so much higher than it used to be that almost every new engine demo we are seeing, they're overdoing it. I mean, I can't even remember the name of I think the Final Fantasy people showed theirs, and it was nothing but particles. And yeah, you show up and it's just a million birds in the air. Like it's
like all the characters will have long hair and like flowing capes, and like all the ladies will be wearing long dresses, and
Fire has a lot of sparks.
every piece of light has a volumetric in it.
What is that? Is that dirt flying around? What was that?
It doesn't matter. It looks awesome. But I think particles, like in terms of gameplay, like they really add something to games because you kind of feel like that feeling of movement is enhanced because you're actually seeing like smoke and little embers flying through you. You know how fast you're moving. It's like it immerses you better. And yeah, like you actually feel the movement, and that's a big deal in games.
This is played off of a PC?
I'm assuming it's a PC where you can see the button prompts or keyboards, but this was clearly not a mouse that this guy's controlling.
That explosion is badass. That's one of the best explosions I've ever seen.
So, but why specifically? Like, what about that explosion really stands out? Like, what's different? What feels different from other games?
What do you think, Lee?
Well, when you make explosions like that, from what it looks like it's actually using particles with like smoke sprites, and people the more you can use, the more detailed you can do it, the better it looks. I think the first time I saw it done really well was Lost Planet. I think their explosions look a lot like that.
In the first one?
Yes. And it's just getting better and better. And they were able to, the way they blew it out with the light and everything, it's just how much particles they can use at once. It just gets more detailed. You know, it gets less squarey. It looks less pixelated.
Kind of, you can almost, like, from my limited understanding of it, like when I see an explosion, I can kind of see like all the elements working. There's like the burst, and then fire, and then smoke, and you can kind of see it transition between these different elements. And I guess when all this stuff starts to bleed together, that's what you're looking for. It's just like I can't tell where one effect ends and the other one begins.
It's almost like resolution basically is what we're talking about. Yeah.
This might be like a single player thing, but if you notice, like all the smoke in that level was flowing in the same direction the wind was blowing.
Right.
And usually in multiplayer maps, you don't see that. Maybe with this, with Battlefield 4, we'll actually see like smokestacks, like from the distance. Like it'll really add to the game if you're on one side of the map and a point falls at the other side and you see like a plume of smoke floating in the distance. Like it's a visual cue that, it's not necessarily a big deal, but if you're just seeing that in the game, like seeing how the terrain is evolving, not only in the ground, how buildings are falling, but also in the sky, how like smokestacks and like stuff like that is changing all around you. That would be like really cool.
Dan, you're jumping up and down. What did you want to point out?
Just that scene where they're running through the water and their feet are trailing behind the water particles, and you can see through the water.
Right.
You can see their feet moving through the water that's splashing back. And just like the lens flares that they're using with the chromatic aberration on the lens flare. I mean, they're just using every kind of trick to throw at you to, it just intensifies what's going on around you, but, they're just doing it to an extreme level. I think it's almost too extreme.
Right.
Just all this, the particles, and then the smoke and the lens flare and
Lens flare is an interesting thing. I was talking to Bloodworth about that the other day. I mean, we don't get lens flare. We don't see that. So it's an interesting aesthetic choice, moving forward to really make these games hyper-realistic. It's like we've kind of accepted that in games. Like, oh, cool, lens flare. And it's like, when have you ever seen that?
I think that's because games are more like seen like movies, like, and they're played to look like every frame is looking through a film camera rather than your eye, like when the camera zooms, your eyes don't zoom either.
This is my big question. Like, are you like back on the controller right now? Like back, or is that just automatic?
This is push forward to awesome, is what I told Ryan.
But I wonder, is it even that though? I mean, does that mean if you don't back up, you'll get a blade in the face, or what? I wonder.
I don't know. Like it didn't give you a prompt, but this is like one of my nitpicks about just watching Battlefield as a single player game, is that it's just like Call of Duty in many respects. Like, you're just pushing forward to see awesome shit happen.
Right.
Like it's not, you're not really like hanging from this. Like you're just pressing buttons. It's a quick time event really. It still looks amazing.
Oh, that's pretty nice. The helicopter's
just vanishing in a
disappeared.
cloud of smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have killed you.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, when he pops up at the end of here, it's kind of like the beginning of Half-Life 2 Episode 1, where it's like, oh, what's up, Gordon? You just had a building fall on top of you. Like,
No one cares.
Yeah, moving on.
You okay, man? Pack inside the Hawkins.
Yeah, what do you think, guys? Like, I think this multiplayer will look 80% this good. There's always a notch, the graphics are bumped down a little bit for multiplayer. This looks better than Battlefield 3 single player, way better. It still has that same look, so I'm wondering if maybe the multiplayer on Battlefield 4 will look as good as a single player in Battlefield 3.
See, I think these little spots, I think that gets in the way. It's like the human eye wouldn't pick that up, and it just looks like somebody got some crap on the camera.
That's a Battlefield 3 thing. Like Battlefield 3, like they super overdid that. Like those overlays of dust on the lens, like everywhere you went in the single player campaign, you saw that. It was crazy.
I mean, to contrast that, one thing that's really nice about the scene is the heat waves that you get. Like that's something that the human eye definitely picks up, and that adds a lot to whenever he looks over at the helicopter.
Amputation.
Easiest amputation ever.
Yeah.
Snap.
You notice all the interactive particles. The particles haven't just advanced in the number that you can have, but the fact that they're actually dynamically interactive now. Like the sparks hit the ground and react, and debris hits the ground and reacts now. And it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, again, if I see a multiplayer game that looks this good, then I'm gonna.
I like how he just gets back up.
What, after the explosion?
Yeah, he passes out. They're like dragging him
But
on
the
the floor.
explosion woke him up.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes you just need a good explosion to get you on your feet. It's better than a cup of coffee.
These guys are like Supermen, you know.
Let's go! Wrecker, take the wheel!
Here you go. This is something that Chris and I were talking about. What if in Battlefield 4, when you got in a vehicle, there's actually an animation of you getting in the vehicle instead of you teleporting inside a tank? Because sometimes, like, I'm shooting at a guy in Battlefield and all of a sudden he disappears. I'm like, where did he go? And oh, he just got into the tank next to
I
him.
actually, when we were back in the glory days of GT, before we were at MTV, we would play Battlefield 2 like every night. We were just, on all those compression servers and all the compression computers, we would just boot them all up. And I remember bringing that up, and like I was the only guy in the whole company. And I'm like, you should see the guy get into the helicopter. And they were like, it's a game, it's fun, like that's the difference between making a game and making something that's realistic. It's like I want to just jump into that helicopter. I'm like, I want to blow up a helicopter while a guy's getting inside of it and see him fly off the helicopter. Like.
Well,
that's
Halo
kinda
does
cheating.
that though. Halo has a mounting animation on
Yeah.
every vehicle, and it's a big deal because you kind of sacrificing a second or two of your control to get in that vehicle. So it's like it's a double-edged sword whenever you decide to climb in a vehicle. And
Surf's up.
There's like shrapnel flying through the car, passing right through you.
so now we're back at the beginning.
So the guy's stuck in the car. I mean, you kind of see him when he's leaving. Like they just his like foot was stuck in a seat or something. Couldn't get him out.
Confirms a report from our
One leg got amputated, the other one got stuck in the car.
Not a good day for that guy.
Staff Sergeant Dunn with KIA for...
So yeah, these come by hot and heavy. So we might want to go back after we watch this and freeze frame some of this stuff. But you were pointing out earlier, Dan, that there's some interesting, maybe like PS3 footage in these little glimpses here.
Some of these shots here, like this right here, that boat. Look, if you pause it and look at it, and there's no reflections in those. Like this was almost like geared towards just showing off what they can handle with the new hardware. Because they have like it's just all reflections and particles and